I'd like to call to order the Rockport Select Board meeting of Monday, February 10th, 2025. It's 6 p.m. and we're here meeting in the Parker Room. And we're also available on YouTube, and we've got a full Select Board here, and we also have some members of the public. So let's get started. First item is amendments to the agenda. Any amendments? Okay. Next is public comment on non-agenda items. Okay. Next is the town manager's report and update. John?
Great, thank you. Yes, so this is a busy time of year in our office. It is budget time. So if folks are looking for responses or emails or phone calls or the like, for me, I'm difficult to reach. My apologies. Unfortunately, this budget is a little bit more unwieldy than most. We're trying to work really hard to get this to a point where the pain that I think people are feeling is minimized, and it's a challenge, even to do that. The requests, my department heads have done a great job in trying to minimize those requests of new things and things that are sort of out of the norm. But I will say it's a struggle. So we're working hard. We've completed our review of all of the department budgets. So now it's the time to go through and craft that into a town manager budget. So we'll be working. Megan and I will be working on that over the next 2 weeks, and then. The 1st of March, that budget will be circulated to the board and to the budget committee and to the world. So that will be an opportunity. There'll be a couple weeks between the release of the budget and the initial budget meeting where we'll go through each of, sort of on a 1,000-foot view of the entire budget, and then move into the reviews of each departmental budgets. One by one, somewhat line by line. And I'll remind, as sort of a preface, John wasn't part of last year, but we've somewhat changed a little bit of the process, in part because the changes to the charter required it to be so. But effectively, to really use those initial budget meetings as an opportunity to sort of, for the board, the budget committee, to really use that as an opportunity to call out places for changes and places where you want to maybe spend more time when you have a subsequent time to do so. But then those areas that are sort of really you can't do anything with, debt for service, for example, can't really change debt service. That's going to be what it's going to be. But those sort of issues, we put those off, so that way you can start to winnow down the number of areas that need to be discussed and reviewed. And for those of you who've been through this before, that can be a very long process. So every little bit that you can take off the table later makes that process a little bit smoother. So as I said, it'll be a couple weeks before those review processes begin. I'm going to be available to answer questions before that time. I certainly don't want anybody, whether it's the 5 of you or the budget committee members, to sort of get started down a wrong track and had questions that seemed amiss. Certainly my letter, I hope, will try to describe, which comes with the budget document, we'll try to describe the whys behind that, but there's a lot of lines in that budget, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why someone could look at it and head down a different path. So my door is open, Megan's door is open, our department heads are open. Obviously we don't want to go too deep into that before, but I certainly want to help any of you, and especially for John and our new budget committee members. It's drinking from a fire hose a little bit. So want to be able to let you all know I'm here to help. So that's what I'm here for. Moving on, we completed our yearly safety training in this space about 2 weeks ago. All of our department heads, all of our employees were attended that day. Really went well. It sounds a bit dry to sort of check off, you know how to deal with bloodborne pathogens, how do you deal with all of the different issues that, video data terminal training, and all these things that you need to do to make sure we have a safe workplace. Our ability to do that allows us to ensure that we get lower insurance rates, that we get a bigger dividend on our workers' compensation pool. All of these things sort of come back to us and pay itself forward. So it's helpful. It takes a lot more organization. Our department heads, Diane, my office really is sort of orchestrating that and putting it all together, but it's a very impressive day, and it's we try to do something a little bit different. This year we brought in Betsy Olton, our HR consultant, and she came in to talk about how the workplace is changing, and really and what are the requirements of an employee in 2025. They're different than they were in 2004 or 1984, and then the various differences in how each of us our ages and our where we grew up. Gen Xers have values that are over here, and those who are millennials are over there, and baby boomers, and it makes for a different place to come from in trying to make a workplace work. But it's really fascinating, and I think it was eye-opening, especially for our department heads, because there are differences in how you manage yourself, how you work, and there's a difference in the amount of experience level someone has. Younger people, by and large, have worked less than you might have at that same age.
Mm-hmm.
So the number of years in the workplace. I mean, I was working for Raising the Flag, but even then, I was working at 15 when I was stocking shelves at French and Braun. 15-year-olds aren't necessarily having those same jobs nowadays. So if you're hiring a 25-year-old, they don't necessarily have 10 years experience. They might have 3. Mm-hmm. So it's just the subtle differences, but they're important differences. So it was a very good process. I have some of the stuff that we've been talking about here, but I want to talk about West Rockport Fire Station. Great news on this front. We have power, we have heat, we have finished spaces, we have some cleaning to be done there. There's obviously some. I don't want to say it's sort of finishing touches, because there is some real work to be done, but we are very close at this point. So there is a bedroom that's filled with computers and monitors and all the things to be able to be spread amongst the rest of the building. So we're trying to push that along, but we're making that progress finally, and starting to see the light is at the end of the tunnel, and we're close. So
Any ETAs?
So the 17th was a date that was thrown around at our last meeting. The real trick is we have to get the certificate of occupancy, because it has to be a place that's suitable for habitation.
Yeah.
So we have to have all our fire alarms and all of those pieces. There's also, we're back ordered on our toilets. So we have one toilet that will be able to go, but this is where we're borrowing from things to make sure we can get everything going. But you gotta have one toilet, we gotta have one sink, you gotta have one shower. But yeah, those are the last pieces. And they're putting together a punch list together now, sort of, as what do we have left?
So when you say the 17th, do you mean a week?
A week.
Oh, wow.
So the issue is our code officer is on vacation until the 20th. So yeah, he and I have talked. I know what he's looking for. We'll make sure it's safe. We just go through safety training. We're not going to put people in a bad spot. But yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Very close.
John, you had a question?
Well,
Sorry.
you mentioned a fire alarm.
Yeah.
When you pull a fire alarm at a fire station.
Where does it go?
Yeah, I know. Another town.
The other room.
They show up. Who burned the popcorn again? It's yeah.
Cooking error.
Yeah, that's right. Put it outside. Yeah, no, but it's those are the things you have to do. Fire marshal wants everything, the hood that's over the range, and that it's just phenomenal. So anyway,
That's great.
It's
That's great
and
news.
it looks great inside. I think once there'll be a ground, an opening, and
That's what I was wondering,
all
ribbon
that.
cutting at some point and
Yeah.
celebration.
There's a lot that's not. So there's some pavement that has to. There's some those summer.
So maybe in the late spring, early summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's going to be, for example, when you drive by, you'll see that there's cones stationed, and right now, given the snow, it's sort of, what is that? Well, it's on top of the granite for the side, like for the walkways, but,
Mhm.
but you need to put the cone on top because one, we had so much snow.
Oh, yeah.
And so no one trips, because it's
Oh,
a trip
yeah.
hazard, you know, but
Yeah.
once you have,
Right.
you pave it or you use concrete to, I know it seems like a small thing, but it,
Well,
obviously,
we don't need anyone getting hurt.
not so small when it's, it's, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're coming in to pick up
Yeah,
the truck.
trying to
and-
grab a
Right.
truck and get out.
But we are, and that's actually, I'm glad you mentioned that. We are actually nearing, this week, we'll have the trucks, the 2 trucks that have been stored at Clay Tolman's and Mike Robertson's businesses and homes. They've been so generous to be able to store both of those engines for us through the construction period, never thinking we'd be into January at this
Right.
point. But those are 2 members, stalwarts of our department, who went above and beyond to work with us and help us out.
Great.
And, that's the kind of department we have.
Absolutely.
So many thanks to those 2 and their families, It's also kind of cool to have a fire truck at your house too.
Sure,
by the way, full time. But anyway.
Grandkids might like that.
Yeah, right, yeah. So the ambulance that we've ordered is due to be arriving at the dealer at the end of this month, so 2 weeks or so. There will be some work that will need to go into that to get it ready, the lettering and so forth. So I'm thinking early March we'll have the new ambulance here. The mini pumper is it'll be probably a little bit later, but again, March will be a big time for the fire department, so.
Yeah, with our new station, we can have our new equipment. And,
Yes, yes.
And then the Northeast Mobile Health Services contract ends at the end of April.
End of
Sometime.
March,
End of
yes.
March.
End of March, so April 1. We are looking at the contract, just seeing what our needs and responsibilities are the rest of the way.
Yep.
So.
I will say, I know it was a long way to get here, but it is nice to hear Rockport being toned out.
Oh, yeah.
And lots of times I'm hearing that Northeast can't respond, so to call Rockport and to know that our citizens have very quick service. It doesn't come without a cost, I realize that, and it was a big step for us to do that, but I think it was absolutely the right direction for our community to make sure we had the services that we needed. So,
I agree. Yeah, it sounds like from scanner information, we've got, yeah, we've
That's
been
good.
essential.
they
to
have
provide.
absolutely been essential.
It's good to know that they're already active,
They absolutely are.
and
yeah.
responding.
And already had opportunities for calls to transport,
Transport,
some in
yeah.
Camden already.
Mutual aid, yeah.
Mutual aid, we're to help.
Absolutely.
And,
First transport was January 19th.
yep, so.
Um,
The crew we have is, part of this is, you don't know who you're going to hire coming into this. We didn't hire anyone from another service nearby, so we weren't sort of robbing of someone of this desperate need we have for EMS workers. That was great. But you also have to have people who have a little bit of a adventure mindset to
Right.
start a new service.
Right, exactly.
You know,
right.
you gotta do some things that you might not have to do if you were,
In an established environment.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
Everybody's new to this.
Yeah.
Tim, one of our EMTs or paramedics, he was largely running the EMS service in Fall River, Massachusetts, who had over 20,000 calls a year. And you see that resume come across, you think, why would somebody be interested? But they want to be here.
When they get
They
to
wanna-
build it from the ground up. I mean,
Exactly.
That's an exciting thing to be able to do.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think,
So
Very
I'm
well.
really happy with these folks,
Mhm.
and what I'm also happy with is I understand that a lot of them are great cooks, so we're
Oh,
gonna all be
really?
fed quite well. So come
Great.
around the corner, Michelle.
I
and-
know, right? What's for dinner tonight? That's right.
Dinner at the fire.
That's right. Couple small things I want to talk about. Obviously, Public Works is very busy. We've had a lot of calls for service here over the last
Yes.
couple weeks.
And
That-
more to come with
Yes.
the weather report, so.
Yes. So we're, obviously brush cutting is cut back because, the snowbanks are here. But they're working a lot of hours, 79 hours last week. If you see them, thank them, give them a salute, we really appreciate what you're doing. It's a hard job, and, if you can just picture you're sort of in a wind tunnel and it's all coming at you and you've got this plow on you and a wing, and it's a lot, and they do great work, and we really appreciate their efforts for us at all hours of the day and night.
Yeah, these storms seem to all start at night.
At night,
Yes.
yes, and they're big, I
Yeah,
mean, they're
they
big
are.
storms.
Get a lot of snow.
Indeed. And I think last thing I just want to mention, anyone who's been down at the harbor, you may notice we've done some window replacement down there at the Harbor Masters building. Those windows were 25 years old, and as what happens when things are of a certain age, they leak and they let air in, and so we replaced those front windows and actually added some additional windows so there's a bit better view for our harbor master and staff in that space. So I think it's going to look really nice. I think people will be really happy with what we've done with it. And so anyway, that building's a little bit out of order right now while we're doing some work down there. But many thanks to our buildings and grounds crew, because if we were putting these projects out to bid and having the private market, not having people working for us do it,
Yeah.
we would never be able to afford what we're doing. So
And-
going through
and-
budget.
Turns out to be a great
It's,
decision
yeah.
to bring that in-house.
I sometimes it works, and I'm just very happy.
Yeah.
Not only that, but Matt and Glenn, who are really, they take great pride in doing good work for the town of Rockport and the people there. And
That's great.
I think that's, you don't always have that. It's a job's a job, but in that crew, we really have that. So thanks to those guys.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, John.
I was letting you get through the whole thing, John.
Yeah.
Can you go back to budget for a minute?
Sure.
And I'm just curious, as a newbie select board member, what do you give in the way of instructions to the staff as they prepare their budgets? Was there a goal for this year? Was there an overall philosophy of it, or is it just the year over year the same directives?
No, definitely not. The first year, every year has had its own theme to it. The first year was really about capital needs and trying to ensure that we're taking a real and true picture of what the needs are of every department. And that's really where the first changes in how we were funding road reconstruction and paving, that's where that really started, the genesis of that. And there were other capital needs that came through that harbor. There was a reserve that we created for the harbor so we could start to work towards what's eventually has become this master plan project that you guys have been working on. The year after that, we looked at more personnel related issues and trying to ensure there's balance in where our offering for benefits and salaries and so forth. This year, it's been hold the line. And I haven't given specific direction of, okay, you need to hit this mark, this mark, this mark. It's been, and I think from what I've seen in reviewing, again, all the budgets at this point, they tried to do that. They've tried to present budgets that reflect hearing my request that what our residents, we need to do our best to try to avoid having our residents feel pain. There's a lot of struggle going on right now. There's a lot of frustration right now. We have a revaluation that's going to be coming this summer, and there's a lot of concern that goes with that. So what I look at my job is to try to answer that, but not to prevent the conversation, the real conversation, because ultimately it's your decision, the five of you, your decision as to what direction we go. So the way I try to set the budget process up is again, we talk about your average budget. We'll talk about what's proposed and what's sort of in my section of the budget. But what I hope is to have, as we go through that departmental budget, and this came up a lot last year because I cut a number of different departments that were not happy necessarily that I had done so. But there's always a question, well, why? Why would you cut that? Or what is this and why is that? And then there's a free-flowing conversation amongst the five of you in the budget committee as to, well, you know, is this the place to draw the line in the sand or not? And I think I've been overruled on most of them by the board and the budget committee, but those are the areas where, you know, ultimately, I give you a chance to hear my thinking of why we could hold off doing this for a year. No, we really need to stand and move forward on a given area. So I try to lay out that conversation so that all of you are as informed or more so than I am. The other thing that happens too is obviously the closer you get to the budget process, the more information you get. So for example, we started the road planning project really intensely in October through capital planning. Well, by the time we've gotten to this point, we approved a bond the voters approved a bond for stream crossings. We've gotten some word in terms of how difficult the permitting process will be, so that juggles some of these things. And then we've had to confront more seriously that intersection with Porter Street and South Street. And so these are all things you will hear about in that process of, okay, well, how the various value judgments we're making to say, okay, this is the most serious, this is the second most serious, and so forth. And then it's really up to the five of you to, you know, chart the course for us. But my job is to try to do my best guess at what I think, you know, puts the five of you in making good decisions, and lay out the options before you. And then if you agree with me, you do, and if you don't, then I agree with where you go end up, and we all go merrily along, you know, towards a vote in June.
And the department heads will be there, so
Yep.
you will be able to ask the department heads questions
For sure.
and sort of get involved in that discussion.
So hearing what you just went through, John, it seems like it would be valuable to have a conversation with the five of us before you start this process, to get some kind of, did we ever give you any kind of general overarching goal?
Not this year, no. And we haven't, I haven't had that here. I haven't received any of that here. I've had boards that have done that in other towns that wanted to, you know, to have that. And then when they saw, in that case, it came up, and then by the time it came back, the board was, oh, that won't work. But that, every
I mean,
case is
isn't that
different.
kind of advice like no more than 2%? Or
Right.
it's like a number
Yeah.
that it's fine,
Right.
but eventually we need to hear what our department heads and what your evaluation of what the needs of the town are.
Yeah.
And we may decide we just want to cap it
Hmm.
at some level, but we also owe our residents, I think, a discussion of what the town's needs are, so we're not being short-sighted in what we approve.
But I would say I've listened to what I've heard, a number of comments made by the five of you on various issues over the last 7 months, I guess 8 months. So I'm that all goes into the pot that stirs around in my head to think, well, what do we need to do? So we'll be, for example, I'm still gathering information, and the wastewater budget is also out there, which will need to be discussed. I'm actually meeting on Wednesday with the new head of operations and maintenance contracts for Woodard and Curran on Wednesday morning. So I'm looking to learn more about how any changes that plan to go into that effort. That's something you guys talked about at one point as well, so.
So we're getting a new someone at Woodard and
Yes.
Kern that's gonna,
Yep.
that might be an opportunity. I mean, I think one thing we talked about in our priority session was evaluating bringing wastewater in-house.
Mhm.
And I think as Michelle and I have been working on the Camden agreement, we realize we're a little bit hampered because we don't have in-house expertise helping us with this. And I think it might be worthwhile to have you evaluate what we have in-house, who's doing what, how could we do this better? Do we want an engineer in-house to help, maybe broader than just wastewater, but
Yeah.
I do think we should explore that. I mean, I do think that's, in working with Camden, that's definitely been, I think, something that's been very beneficial to have that level of expertise. And in the end, I would think it might be a cost savings too. I mean,
That would
I
be
know
what
we-
we'd hope, yeah.
right, so,
And that's, I sort of have shortened my view of things because I've been trying to so focus on trying to get a small budget this year. It may be something that's not a short number this year, but a savings over a longer term. And I think that's, something to look at. I can put something together. I don't know that I would fold it into the budget. I almost probably would want the five, and the same idea of having the five of you, maybe this is sort of
Evaluate what you put
Absolutely,
together,
yeah.
yeah.
like a side project, and bring it back maybe at the next meeting.
That would
and
be great.
Just talk about, let me see where that turns into, but it, might be, yeah, let me give some more thought to
well,
that.
it just sounds
but-
like it might be a good
Yeah.
time to do that.
Right, if
I
we're
mean,
getting
in a
somebody
position,
new.
right,
We don't want to spend money getting them up to speed on
Sure.
necessarily. I mean, maybe
Right.
we can't avoid that, but.
Okay, I'll do that, yep,
Okay.
thanks.
Anything else in your report, John, or anybody have any questions or comments for John on the report? Lots of things happening, thank
Lots of
you.
things happening. Yes.
Things are busy, okay. Consent agenda, the item on that is approve meeting minutes. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve consent agenda as presented.
Second?
Okay.
So to be, a little
That's-
bit of discussion.
Yeah, hang on for a sec, let me just make sure I get the,
The notes.
yeah, any discussion?
So to be clear, we're going to correct the motion that was made for the directive to the Harbor Committee. That's
This
why
is
we
just
did
the
that.
January 13th Select Board minutes.
Oh, this is a different.
This is the consent agenda, then the next one will be the December
Action
9th.
item is December 9th.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep, I missed that, okay.
Okay.
Yep.
All those in favor?
Remember, we split it out.
Yeah, I just,
Okay.
we got
Next.
confused last time, and I got
Now
confused
we
again
move.
this time.
It's a
Okay,
theme, John, it's a
yep,
theme.
I know. And you don't really want your agenda to be full of minutes, but
Right,
anyway,
right.
here we are. As John Veman correctly pointed out, in January, when we were set to approve the December 9th minutes, we didn't, the minutes did not contain the full motion that had been approved by the Select Board at our December 9th meeting, and that related to the Harbor Committee work plan. And our packet actually didn't have the correct one either, but we were all handed that tonight, and that'll be in our minutes. And I'll just read, it was a move to approve the Harbor Committee work plan as amended to request that the Harbor Committee develop a plan in 2026 and thereafter for winter storage of private floats and boats anywhere other than the Marine Park green space, for example, on the northeast side of the Goose River. So, do we have a motion to approve those minutes as amended?
Can I make that motion?
You may. Is there a second?
I'll say.
Second?
Okay.
I'll go ahead. Get it, Michael.
You give it to Michael? Okay.
You're on
All right,
board.
any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, now we're caught up on minutes.
Could I just quickly, so the second page of this is the amended work plan, which includes the motion. So we can send that off to Abby and the committee, but Kim, I don't know, you may want to just explain at the next, you're the Harbor, right?
Kim's Harbor,
Yep.
Just explain what, because
why it showed.
it doesn't always happen like that, so there's sort of a, but you may have to explain it, but anyway. Because Sam wasn't here that night, and, the vote
Right,
happened.
nobody
and-
from the Harbor Committee was here.
Yeah,
So
and they may have
they-
watched, but I just,
Yeah, just so they're not surprised that we've taken the liberty of
Of adding.
adding
What?
something to their work plan.
and I had this conversation with Diane today, and she's like, the board can change the work plan? I'm like, great, that's, that's the process, but it was just one of those things where, anyway, we got there in the end. Thank you, everybody, great teamwork.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and an important discussion to have
Yeah,
as a town, just where do we want all those private floats and boats?
yep.
Okay. Next is act on committee applications. We have Ken Von Felton here, who's, wants to be a Pathways Committee alternate. Do you want to come on up and just introduce yourself and a little bit of background on your interest?
Sure. Hi, my name is Ken Von Felton, as she said. I've lived in Rockport about 14 years with my wife. Do I need to get a little closer?
Yeah, there you go.
Very good. Honestly, I'm newly retired from my professional career as a mechanical engineer and a program manager, looking to see how I can get more involved in the community, get more involved potentially in helping people or helping the group. I looked at what applications were open or what committees needed some help, and that was one I saw sparked an interest. I don't have any great experience in pathways as a civil engineer, or not a civil and mechanical, but I'm a user. I enjoy them. I enjoy them with my dog, who's licensed, Joan. And
Good.
so that's sort of my interest. I'm looking to get involved.
Great,
Great.
great.
Well,
Thank you for doing that.
I think- I
Anybody
think
have questions
I think
for
being a
Ken?
user is one of the key
That's the-
elements,
Absolutely.
you
Yeah.
know, to knowing or having insight into what would be smart.
Great. Thank you for
Thank you.
coming to the meeting
Yes, sticking
and for
out.
volunteering. And a mechanical engineer, I'm pretty sure we could find a few other things that might be helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Bill's over here going, could
I was
I
like,
have
I'm
a little
ready,
help?
I'm ready. All right.
So do we have a motion?
I move to approve Kenneth Von Felton, committee application as a Pathways Committee alternate with a term ending in June 2028.
Second?
Second, Kim. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Great.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Kim. All right. Next is act on comprehensive plan, which is how it's phrased, but I want to clarify what, come on up, David, what we're doing tonight. Tonight, our only action is to certify the comprehensive plan so that it can go to the state for review. And this is it's a procedural review to make sure we've checked all the boxes that the state requires to be included in a comprehensive plan. So in terms of what we're doing here tonight, we're not approving the substance of the comprehensive plan. We're really just allowing it to move forward on the next step, which is review at the state level. There'll be public hearings. We'll have an opportunity to hear what our public is saying about the comprehensive plan and evaluate that, and then make our own decision about putting it on the ballot in June in whatever form. John?
So, just so I'm clear, Denise, the plan as it exists now is the plan. We are not going to amend it from this point forward?
We could.
We could.
We could amend the
So
plan.
when would the process be to have that conversation? Where would the point to have that conversation be?
Why, let's hold, that question is there, just because David's up here, and then Orion can answer that. There will be,
Okay.
I mean, I understand people are here who want to know the answer to that. I'm not trying to hide it. It's just, maybe we just let David give us a little information on the comprehensive plan, and we'll talk process.
You know, it's, thought was, rather than just sort of throw it at you and you catch it and we run away and hide, ought to give a little bit of a handoff from the Comprehensive Plan Committee. Trying to figure out the best word, been trying to think best word to use it. This is more than an update, but it's not a all-new plan. So it wasn't just taking the 2004 plan and just kind of updating, making sure the information was current. But what we've done was heavily build on that. So the effort started in 2019. The idea was take a couple of years at most and get the plan redone. The general recommendation is every 10 years or so have an update, and the plan goes back to 2004 when it was officially adopted, the current one. So the process the committee used was heavily community engagement. We started off with a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunities, threat meeting upstairs here. I think that was maybe even in 2019. Pretty well attended meeting and got a lot of good feedback there. Also worked online to get feedback, information, ideas from people with several things. Did a traditional type of survey. Got a lot of response to that. Put up an idea wall where people could put virtual Post-its up and other people could respond to them, etc. And also had a map where people could put pins in where things they wanted to note. As the plan developed, we partway through had, I think it was 4 community engagement meetings around the town in various locations where we talked about where things were at that point with in terms of the process to get feedback. I have to say those were somewhat sparsely attended, although we made every effort to publicize those to the extent possible. And so the plan worked through there. The plan, as we got it finished up, is about 200 pages. It's about equally split between the main body and the appendices. There's a lot of information that the state requires, hence the getting it checked out to make sure you have all these inventories, lists, data from a wide variety of sources. And the committee decided as much of that data and information as possible should go in the appendices. So hence the appendices are about the same length as the, maybe a little bit longer than the main body. The body of the plan is structured with an implementation section, talking sort of high-level view of what would needed to move forward, not getting into specific items. Those appear elsewhere in the body. A future land use chapter, since one of the primary things, major way the town affects plans for itself is with land use. So there's a whole future land use section. Then get into policy guides with recommendations. No, plan is just a plan with recommendations in terms of housing, natural and water resources, marine resources, climate change, resilience and solutions, economic and community vitality, public facility service and physical capacity, transportation, recreation, and history. The new one compared to 2004 was the area of climate change resilience, and that's spread in a number of places in the plan, but that's something that's really come to the forefront in the last 20 years. I won't give you the whole list of the appendices, et cetera. Do want to note that while the committee was the ones responsible for getting the draft together, we had a lot of assistance from a number of town committees. So in a lot of ways, it was very much a collaborative effort, pulling on the town committees, ones that we reached out to pretty much all the committees, boards, commissions, et cetera, and asked for feedback, input, et cetera. And in particular, the Pathways Committee, Conservation Commission, Economic Development Committee, Harbor Committee, Library Committee, Parks Beautification, and the Planning Board submitted material, a lot of which wound up in the plan. In terms of acknowledgements, I won't go through the whole list that's in up in the front of the thing. Looking at it, I did recognize there's a couple names missing in terms of who were a couple of the people early on. Those would be Taylor Allen and Marcia Steinglass. Both were members of the committee at various times. And also should mention select board liaisons. We had a couple different people serve that role, and that was really helpful and well appreciated. And finally, the plan really wouldn't have happened without Ryan's input. This was, we actually started, I think, under Bill, the former town planner, and so he sort of left things, got going, and then pandemic hit, et cetera, and it took a little while. There were times competing priorities for Orion's time, et cetera. So anyway, we've got it submitted to you for your consideration. Orion's the expert on how the process works. So thank you.
Thank you for all your work and the committee's work, because it has been a multi-year process, and is our best efforts at this point, or the committee's best efforts to reflect Rockport's comprehensive plan.
So, David, thank you for all that. It's been great working with the committee. It has been a long process, but in doing any kind of a documentation, if you're doing it in-house, it's just going to take some time. So I've enjoyed the process myself, working with the community, gathering this data, compiling it into a document has been worthwhile. The fun and clunky bit is taking the state requirements, which is one of the items that were here, and putting that into the comp plan and getting a committee to say, I don't know, does that really fit us? And some do, some don't, and it's just an interesting balance act of, state says if you're gonna have a comp plan, you're gonna have to adhere to it and meet these standards. So there's a lot of, not a lot, you won't use that word too strongly, but there's a few items in there that maybe the town won't act on, won't move on, but it's in there as part of this requirement. So tonight, and it's not a necessity that it happens tonight, but what the select board does have to do is certify that it meets the Growth Management Act. So it's in the packet, the exact wording that y'all will adhere to. But if you want, I can read it.
Well, I think, I mean, it is in here, and we'll get to that point of a motion.
Can we
Yeah,
ask
no, I was
questions
just saying.
But
before
yeah,
the
we have some
motion?
questions.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know John's there's a question standing.
have
of-
questions.
Yeah.
And Michelle.
So there was a question about editing it further. So do we want to talk
Sort
about
of, we've
that?
got, if there's some public hearings coming up, talk to us more about what happens. This is a
Sure.
piece of it that goes up to the state, and that's what we're going to do, that's the official business act we're doing tonight.
But is that premature?
No.
Because if we haven't given our feedback, my concern is we send something that appears final to get an approval from the state, in which we haven't given you feedback yet or voiced our concerns, and the public hasn't done that either.
Well, they have. We've held our public
Well, I
meeting.
get
That
that,
was
but it's
the
not-
public meeting.
Okay.
That was the satisfying requirement, and the committee did send out to the select board to get feedback on it, to act on.
For the,
And this was around that timeline of, we want it on the June ballot. Well, in order to do that, here's these checklists that we need to do. So the comp plan committee and myself had assumed that we'd heard back from the select board. So we have everything.
We just got the final on.
Well, the
the
draft
list.
that was submitted to the whole community, that's what we heard back from, and there were 3 items around it. It was housing section, they wanted more information in that, but the committee felt that the housing section was satisfactory as presented. There was more information in the climate section, which the Rockport Conservation Commission, they did a great job drafting that up for us. And what was the 3rd item?
I remember, go ahead.
Okay, so.
Comment about process, go ahead.
So that information had been collected, and then the comp plan committee made the edits that they felt as a committee were worthwhile making. And then it got compiled into this final document, which has been submitted to the state, saying we have met these checklists to keep this process moving. Now, does that mean you can't edit it? You cannot edit it? No. It can still be edited, but here's the process and what you're gonna have to do. If the select board says, no, there's like a section in here, we're gonna have to rework it, fine, it'll get reworked, but it's gonna have to go back to the comp plan committee. They're gonna have to mull that over, and then there's gonna have to be another public meeting, and then it's gonna have to get resubmitted back to the state. So that's, and if it's, the edits are viewed substantial. So that's another determination that's gonna have to be made. If the edit that is made constitutes as a substantial edit to the document.
who makes that determination?
That's the question. So
Well,
I think there's going to be probably the comp plan committee. They're probably going to have to draft something. There's not a guideline of it, but
Yeah.
probably the comp plan committee.
We'll get to comments later. Oh, okay.
Oh,
Sorry, Ryan.
Jeff,
Speak,
turn me up.
or speak closer.
I don't know how much closer I can get.
That's better.
Um,
So are you saying there's no more public hearings?
There will be, so the next public meeting per se will be at the select board meeting that you all make a determination on if this is going to be on the June ballot.
Mm-hmm.
That would be the next public meeting. But in terms of checklist requirements on this process, that's already been satisfied, which was at, I forget the date exactly, but that public meeting that was held.
Well,
I
I'm
think
just
it
gonna,
was in December.
I'm just gonna share my concerns with,
That's fine.
as I read through it. And I appreciate all of the work that's gone into it. I know there's been hundreds of hours and lots of people.
Sure.
I was surprised to see the section, and if I didn't read it before and should have provided feedback, I'll take that. But I was surprised to see the section on short-term rental, because we had a vote in 2021.
Denise, can you get her by the microphone? I can't.
Oh, sorry. We had a vote in 2021
Hmm?
where our community said they did not want regulation on short-term rentals.
Sure.
So I was surprised to see that in there, to be honest, because we have voted on it. I was surprised that there was an action to gather data with an immediate time frame on it, since whatever is put into a comprehensive plan is something that the town is going to action on. I mean, that's the whole point of the comprehensive plan. So I was surprised to see that as well, because I think we have better use of our time to collect data on other things. And my other concern is that, listen, we are in a situation where people are paying a lot of taxes. I don't want to be regulating what people can and cannot do with their homes. And I don't want to think that telling someone they can't have a short-term rental is going to solve workplace housing or low-income housing.
Sure.
Because it does not, in my opinion. So I personally have a hard time supporting a plan that has something in it that our voters already said that they did not want. So.
And I know David wants to talk. I want to just make sure people who are watching or listening to this, just so we, I think, understand the language we're talking about. So in the comprehensive plan, there's a category, seasonal homes. Is this accurate, Orion, or do you want to?
I'm pulling it up right now.
Okay.
The first time it's mentioned is on page 37. That's where the action is to collect short-term data.
That's the action, yeah, and I think page 35, maybe, does that
maybe.
have
It
a?
is page 35.
Page 35
Page
has
35.
a
Seasonal
section.
homes.
Under seasonal homes, and I'll just read it. There are a significant number of seasonal homes in Rockport. There is an increasing trend in the number of non-owner occupied homes which are being converted into short-term rentals offered during the spring/summer months, resulting in a decrease of the available inventory of housing in the year-round workforce. That's all the language I'm
That's
aware
it?
of. And then there's an action item.
Yep, and then there's additional documentation in the appendix regarding short-term rentals. Challenges the workforce housing market are twofold, investors are buying properties, et cetera. So I just personally have a concern with that. It appears to me, while I'm sure that it was not the intent, it appears to me we've kind of buried it in here. And my concern is that if this goes to the voters in June, then someone's going to approve a comprehensive plan because they know the work that's gone into it. And now this becomes an action we're going to take over the next 10 years.
So
And that doesn't sit well with me.
So I'm not clear, Michelle, on what the action is that you're concerned about. Is it the action that you're concerned about just collecting the rental data?
Well, why would we spend time or resources, our resources, on collecting data for something we've already been told our community does not want? That's my concern.
Can we, I know David wants to say
Yeah,
something. And
It's always interesting what becomes a controversial item. The committee had couple times had pretty brief discussions about short-term rentals. And the one I remember, the final one, I don't remember any of the discussions along the lines of we need to get regulation of short-term rentals. And in fact, I think for most of the discussions were along the lines, well, it's an active item in the town, so let's let the town decide.
But the town did decide.
Yeah, let me say, so let's let the town, so subsequent to the town with the vote, our question was, okay, should we say anything about short-term rentals? The community engagement we got was there's a lot of concern about short-term rentals in, different aspects, different views of them. So what the committee decided was to not be absolutely silent on the issue and pretend it's not an issue in the community, but given the community engagement we got, acknowledge that there's a fair amount of concern, passion in various ways, different aspects to the extent of people. I think we're all familiar with the different sides of it. And so it's just the paragraphs in there saying, the data shows, et cetera, that it has some effect on short-term rentals. And then the final bit about the data collection was just saying, hey, if the discussions come up again, it would be good to have some data. My view is it's always better to have data when you're having discussions and making decisions than not. That's all it was intended to. It was not intended as sort of a secret plan to get an issue before the voters in a year or anything at all like that. It was a very deliberate decision saying, hey, this was, there was a vote on it, and, you know, it's not, town seems to be clear on it, so let's not propose that there should be anything happening other than just the data. I think you could probably, if you saw fit, remove the data collection. Again, that was not as a precursor to get any action going. That was just to have the data available for the town. You know, one of the functions the comprehensive plan serves, I did not appreciate till I got on the committee, is the amount of data that's in it. So it's kind of, you know, it's a comprehensive plan, but also almost a Wikipedia for Rockport in terms of information. If you want data, it's the place to find it.
And I appreciate that.
So, thank you.
I am data driven, but I also know that when you put something in a plan, there is then action to it. And so if we have that in our plan, there's going to be an expectation that something happens. And that's what concerns me and doesn't sit well with me, to be honest, that we had a vote, I think it was 405 to 194, I think were the numbers. And it just seems like it's being brought up again.
So just real quick on that, though, that vote, and I don't deny that vote, that happened, sure.
Yeah.
That LD 2003 also didn't come into play yet, that was after that vote. LD 2003 has these additional dwelling units which increase density, which isn't a bad thing, and ADUs are beneficial and can be utilized. But what they do is your lot coverage, they can exceed that, and they can also exceed with or exist within your setbacks. So if you have a lot that otherwise our ordinance says you cannot build on it further, an ADU can come in. And there are a few people, and it's been mentioned in a few meetings, that it's a concern of the ADUs, and how are they being used, we don't know. But also to a point of making a decision on what the town's gonna do, if you don't have any data on it, what are you gonna do? What's a percentage point right now of the housing stock being used as short-term rentals that you're comfortable with, to where you need to act on it or you don't need to act on it?
But why do you need to, I guess, why do you need to act on it? I mean, and we don't need to keep going on. I just want to make sure that my thoughts are heard. And it concerns me that we will send something to the state that is, in my eyes, final, it's called a final, that it might be difficult for us to change on the back end.
It's not difficult to change on the back end. We can change it. There's just a public meeting that we have to adhere to in the resubmission. That's it.
Okay, that's it from me.
Thanks, Michelle. Any other discussion on the board?
My only comment is, on page 35, short-term is hyphenated, and the others are not, so if you're doing a search, I missed that.
Make
I
it
mean,
consistent.
Little minor
To
thing,
do
but
it. I think that's not too big of a change.
I have other comments, not necessarily focused on the part that Michelle's raising, but I'm not sure this is a useful forum for discussing them, because we're talking about trying to send this to the state.
It's already been sent to the state. This
Sorry.
certification, yeah, that all that was needed was the chair and the chair of the select board and the chair of the comp plan committee to say, yes, send this off to have it checked.
So what they need is this, but the certification we're being asked tonight.
So
What's its-
in order for this to go on the June ballot, this certification that you have in front of you has to be signed
Okay.
by the select board.
And then what is the rest, what's the rest of the process? It's our select board meeting that we decide, is that our March meeting or our March meeting? We set the April,
So
or the June ballot.
Yeah, just as a reminder, so at your next meeting, all items that presumably may, not necessarily will, may go on the June ballot would be ordered to be drafted as warrant articles. At that point, you'd make that decision as to, again, that this isn't like the final. At that point, then we take those votes from the select board, we turn them into warrant articles, and then the clerk will draft the warrant, and then at your April meeting, by which time your budget's complete and all the warrant articles are drafted, that would be the opportunity where what will make it or what will not make it on the ballot is decided. And then subsequent to that, after that point, whatever does make the ballot will be part of the warrant. The warrant then will be posted. There'll be a public hearing on all of the items that are on the June ballot at your May meeting, where people can come in, ask questions. Really, that's meant to take the place of the sort of debate of what used to be open town meeting upstairs. And then people go off and they'll vote absentee or in person in June. So there's a number of stops along the way where decisions will be made as to whether or not to include the comprehensive plan on the ballot. So the first check will be in March. The final check as to whether or not it will be on the ballot is in April at your meeting, and then from there, it's up to the voters.
So if we had concerns with, Michelle's expressed a concern with this language, when should we decide as a board whether I mean, I'm hearing that this language was sort of a compromise and a listening to the public. There definitely are, whether the vote didn't so indicate, there's definitely concerns on both sides of this issue, and that this was sort of a compromise position, recognizing that this select board has said we are not going to regulate short-term rentals. We have the vote from our voters, and that has, we've every opportunity in the last year and a half, we've taken it out of the mix to acknowledge that vote. But I also think times can change.
Leadership can change.
Leadership changes, but also the community can change. And it might not be, maybe the data shows that it's becoming an increasing problem and that's a possible solution, or at least an opportunity for the community to evaluate that issue within the next 10 years. I mean, it's sort of hard to say no one can touch that issue for the next 10 years because of a vote that's now 3 years old, I think.
And to add on to that, I mean, there are people who are arguing that there's a benefit to short-term rentals, so the data could show
Right.
that it's a benefit.
You hear stories about communities who ban short-term rentals and then their housing prices plummet, and all of a sudden the restaurants and the people in the town who depended on the tourist business are hurting. So it's definitely a topic that should be more discussed, and I don't think that's on this select board's priority agenda. So, but in terms of the comprehensive plan, but the real question at this point is that something we should really talk about and vet tonight, or should we all hear what we're hearing, think about it, talk about it more at our March meeting? What's the best way to resolve that? I think we can do the certification, but what's the significance of that if we still have potentially a concern with?
So there's a I don't want to say there's a non-zero chance that there will be issues that the state will flag and want to come back and see change.
Okay.
They may be non-substantive changes, though, that wouldn't require a subsequent vote. But there may be. We don't know.
Yeah.
But it sounds like it's already gone to the state, right?
Right, but but in terms of the feedback, we don't have the
Oh,
feedback.
right, I get that.
That's what I
Okay.
mean. Like usually it takes somewhere between 6 and 8 weeks from the time you submit for the state agencies, because it goes to almost every state agency, and then they have the right to comment on individual topics that are within their purview. So by submitting it now, we would have a sense of understanding before the vote what areas those are. And when we're talking about, they're probably not things that any of us and probably 99% of our community would be really
Care
tuned in
about.
on. They aren't policy changes necessarily. Some are, but most of them aren't. Most of them are pretty detailed, like really only the bean counters of bean counters are the ones who really care about this stuff. I'm not saying everything is, but by and large, that's what's on that checklist. But in terms of process, right, where does the board come in? I think, obviously, and I not knowing particularly what issues would be or if there are any issues, I made the comment last time, we want to be very careful about editing the document that's gone this far. the board has the ultimate right to say what goes on the ballot or what doesn't, and what it looks like, and what color it is, and everything about it. But obviously, to do that runs the risk of maybe a small risk, or maybe it's a big risk, of undoing public sentiment that was gathered over years and from a committee that worked on it. So there's a balance of that the board has to consider in making that decision. I don't know where the five of you might
wonder-
come in on that, but you have to, I think that's the
You run in
balance.
the risk
I-
too, though, of then it, I mean, I absolutely, the community needs to vote on a comprehensive plan. Then you run the risk of, if it gets shot down, because there are things
Right.
on there that
Yep.
the community doesn't want, right? So we
Right.
can get to this point, and then we can get it to vote, and then it cannot be passed. And
That's
then
right.
what do we do then? I guess
Then-
that's my question. What do
Yep.
we do at that point?
And I wonder, I know, Michelle, maybe part of your reaction was the idea that the data collection is immediate. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
so are there options? Can, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, I mean, we
you
can
can
change
put
the
that out?
immediacy,
I
we
mean,
can
I'm,
pick
I'm
that-
just suggesting if it
So
sounds like,
I put
holy
immediate
cow.
on there because we already collect the data. We're already.
My
collecting.
recollection is that data collection was not something the committee was passionate about. It was
Yeah.
more of a, oh yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Right,
Like I
what-
said, so if discussions come up in the town in the future, there will be some data in there. It was not a, let's get data collected and then we'll sit
well,
there and.
and that is the way it appears, right? Because it says immediate, so it's
It's
suddenly
way-
like, oh, it's
yeah,
now
depending
gonna be
on
there.
what
Right.
an individual's concerns are and what an individual's attitudes are, it can appear that way or not. But the other comment I would throw in is somebody might want to check the state law. I'm not a lawyer. I did read the state law, which is a little bit confusing the way it's written on this. And it basically, when I spoke earlier, I forgot to say that the Comprehensive Plan Committee had a public hearing.
Yep.
And this issue did not come up at the public hearing. I'm pretty sure it was in there before it went to the public hearing. Yeah, I'm virtually certain it was, because what got changed was different things. So it was in there, it didn't come up at the public hearing. Anyway, the state law says the Comprehensive Plan Committee will hold a public hearing. And we know with so much notice and so forth. So somebody might want to just double check to see if there needs to be another public hearing, who officially holds it.
Yeah.
That's a good
It's not a big deal, I'm just saying, if you
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
dot the
yeah,
i's and
good
cross
idea.
the t's.
point. Yep.
Good point.
Yeah, the other thing is, as reflect what John said, we did our best, I know Orion did his best to figure out that we met all the state requirements in terms of the data. There's a whole lot of data, more so it's not, policy mandates from the state, it's all this data and formats and so forth. And so we did our best to do that, so we want to get the review from that to see, does something need to get reformatted? Is there a different source of data that should have been used, et cetera?
If we start monkeying with some of the,
Right, no, and I don't disagree, and I know there are rules and laws and regulations. I just want to make sure we are acting in the best interest of all.
anybody else?
I'm still not clear.
What
Can
we're
somebody give me a succinct statement about when and if we could change anything in this comprehensive plan before it goes on the town warrant?
Yes?
And when would that be, John?
Whenever you have it on an agenda to discuss, I
Okay,
suppose.
all right, thank you.
Yeah.
That's good. So one suggestion I would make is there anywhere in this process for us to stipulate that we have a specific timeline to review and update the comp plan so it doesn't sit on the shelf for 10 years before anything gets updated on it? Have we ever done that?
No, we use the state law that says you're supposed to use 10 years as your benchmark for that.
Right, but it just,
Yeah.
doesn't it get pretty
Which
stale
would mean
after
we should start 5 years.
5, 10 years?
Yeah.
Yeah, and now we're 20 some
We're
odd years.
right,
Yeah.
exact. 20 years later, we're into that.
I mean, really to Michelle's point,
Yeah.
or Denise's point of, like, we don't know what might happen
Right,
5 years from now,
exactly. Yeah.
especially at the pace things are moving.
Well, you're,
It's a dumb question, whether someone in Orion's position say, hey, we did this in 2025, and
yes.
Time for us to get going
it's time to
again.
get going
Yes.
for the next one.
And that's the advantage of having staff, because we didn't really have staff support on this kind of
Well,
thing
the last
before.
one we did was what, 2004?
Yes.
That's what,
Yes.
21 years
that's what I'm
later.
talking about right there.
Exactly. So the
And
state
there
law
were-
of 10 years didn't
But-
really.
Discussions about updating it.
But
I remember
I'm trying to
hearings
hold
when that
ourselves
first got active
accountable.
In the town, 2015.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
there was.
And we started, as you mentioned, 2019, and then we had a pandemic, and that sort of really slowed us down for a couple years, but.
Right. I guess I'm just trying to hold ourselves accountable and come up with our own rule, our own law, or whatever we want to call it, to make sure we don't, get soft on paying attention to it.
Our planner has put in his budget money to set aside for us to, instead of having our planner do the work, but have hire outside staff to
And
complete the
shouldn't there
plan.
really almost be, not so much completing, but to your point about reviewing? I mean, we review policies and procedures and all of that annually. Shouldn't we at least pick it up annually and say, here, let's go through it, where, are we on track, are we not, what's our
Yep.
next step? Versus, a 5-year.
We're putting
And
it on the shelf.
To
Right.
build on that a little bit more, having, particularly in the capital improvement planning end of our town business, do we have an official group that does that and that checks in on that on a regular basis?
For capital planning or for?
Capital improvements.
No, we used to, and found that was a change in one of the committee structure, which occurred back in 21, where we effectively folded their process in with the budget committee, and the budget committee found, and then removed any sort of signs of their involvement. There wasn't enough for a capital planning group to do, because largely it's staff driven. So that's why ultimately the capital plan ends up coming back to the board, and it doesn't, it's a sort of more of an internal process than it had been. I would say in terms of how do you keep this foremost on your mind, I was in your shoes in 2004, and there were a lot of strong opinions, a lot of strong ideas at that time, because the prior effort, I think, was in 89 or 90, and a lot of change had occurred in that time, from 90 to 2004. That's what drove a lot of the conversation, and those that were involved in that group in 2004, obviously, they put a lot of time and effort into it. Very different process than what has been undertaken in the last few years. But it was more of a narrative-driven conversation, very thick, less about statistics and less about meeting the standards that the state's looking for, but more about trying to capture the sentiment of what Rockport was. And as a board member, I found that very, very helpful, because it gave me, okay, this is the checklist, right? And so once this plan is adopted, then the next step by the board is to create an implementation committee that will take all the different pieces that are in this plan and actually put them into practice. And so that's how we ended up with a charter. It's how we ended up with the Board of Assessment Review. It's how we ended up with a number of the different things that came through that period of time. Implementation committee was really what drove that. And it was really strong for 2-3 years, and then you implemented the bulk of it, but there's still things that we didn't get to. Richard Drumson was always hopeful that we'd get that endowment and pay for the school budget. We never found that.
Come on,
He hasn't
Richard.
given up on that,
Come on,
that's still.
right.
But I'm still hopeful. But those are, you have to, there's a shelf life for these things, and the ideas have a shelf life. And it would have been nice in 2014, 13 if the town had picked it up. I suppose at that point maybe they thought there hadn't been enough change in that period of time, but clearly, as we sit now 20 years after, there are issues. When you deal with small issues that are 10 years old, but now when they're 20 years old, they become big issues. And that's some of probably what we're talking about here tonight.
And also, it gets hard to get a group together, but
Yeah.
if you can kind of keep a group together and keep it moving and keep
Yeah.
it engaged, it's easier than having to start cold.
Yeah, and I think, so in Newcastle, when I was in Newcastle, they had just finished the public engagement section. and there was plans, they brought somebody in, and they said, oh, we're gonna have them do a new comprehensive plan, a new land use ordinance, and we'll pay them $130,000, we'll have it all done in 6 months. Almost the entire time it took for my 5 years in Newcastle to get an approved comp plan and an approved land use
Yeah.
ordinance.
Yeah.
Because these things are hard, and if you have too big a change too fast, people aren't ready for that. But it's hard to have staff handle these projects, and when you pair, if it's staff and select board members and committee members are there merely, just as like this, what we're seeing with the harbor, master plan, that's really it's really an effort where we're trying to make sure that the balance is right, as opposed to actually doing the drafting, doing the writing, that's not necessarily what we're all good at, but we can say, it's just as Michelle is, that doesn't feel right for me, or this doesn't feel right for me, or this isn't this isn't the right approach here. We're all better at that than having somebody who's got to oversee a department and make sure, he's hiring people for his assistant. Doesn't work
Right.
as well.
Has to meet the state requirements.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I am still a little confused about what our intent tonight is on this motion, because it sounds like it's already gone to Augusta. Maybe I'm confused on what we're approving to go to Augusta, because it sounds like it's gone. So do we need to
Yeah,
approve
what's
that?
the,
I mean,
right, if we don't approve this tonight, what does that mean?
That's fine. And
Is it just-
the intent for me, and maybe there was a miscommunication between myself and John, of which I apologize for, but is to put on your table that it's ready, it's going off to the state. So those
Okay.
documents-
So we know that.
so it's gone.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
It's
then
on
this
its
is an
way.
item that y'all are gonna have to do before it gets placed on the
So in
ballot.
March.
But it could be done
right?
at the same
Be
time.
done at the same time.
So at our March meeting, we
Yeah.
can,
So before this is packaged up and saying, hey, voters, this is what you're voting on, that
And at
block
that
has to
same
be signed.
time, to answer John's question, if we bring it back in March, then if there are changes, we would bring those to March? Is that the plan? I mean, I realize that changes are,
I feel like we shouldn't do changes tonight because it's sort of catching us a little cold and I
Right,
think
right. We
I
should
think we need to
read-
step back and
Right,
just
and read
realize
through
the
word
level of
for
effort
word.
that's gone through here. It's a compromise on a lot of issues. And it is a 10-year plan at minimum.
yeah, understood.
So,
So, yeah, I'll have to find the email again, but I'm fairly confident that there was one that went out, soliciting this feedback initially, so I was asked to mention that again, to incorporate this so that we could make this June ballot. So if the select board says, we gotta change some stuff, then just be comfortable that the June ballot probably isn't gonna happen. So that's the only caveat here.
Okay.
that's a
So,
big caveat.
to John's
actually.
point,
Big, right?
Yeah,
To
it's
John's
big.
point, what I agree with as well, if the select board is not comfortable with this going before the voters, then it's not gonna go before the voters until y'all are happy with it, so.
Right.
Well, I have no problems with what's here in this document. There's things I wanted to talk about just to clarify the meaning, and, perhaps Michelle's hit one of them, but, I don't see
Yeah,
a need to reinvent the wheel in any way here.
No, I think we have to be really careful given the level
Yeah,
of citizen
I want to
involvement.
respect
and-
all the people that have spent endless hours
Yeah.
on this. I don't want to be second guessing.
And know that we still have control over this. It's not that something can happen out of the comprehensive plan that doesn't have to come in front of us.
And so,
We're not gonna,
Yeah, this doesn't immediately trigger,
No.
it just gives guidance.
and I guess, Michelle, to your point here of your concern of the implementation table, and collecting data, if in the budget I propose something, John's probably gonna slash it.
Gonna
saying,
cut it
"We're not
anyway."
doing it." Or it comes before
Or
you.
I'm gonna slash it.
So,
many ways.
Listen, I'm not looking to rewrite this whole thing, and I'm not taking away from all of the work that was done. I know it was hundreds of hours, so I don't want any of you to walk away thinking, why you don't come in at the 11th hour and bring this up. But it is on the hearts and minds of me and others in this community. And what I don't want, from an optics perspective, is for people to think that we didn't listen to them,
Sure,
that we're
yeah.
not taking their vote into
yeah.
serious consideration, and that we're looking to, when we say things immediate, that we're looking to go out and now we're gonna gather all this data and we are gonna come up with a restriction. Now, I know we can't make that decision, and I know anything would go to the voters, but I just wanna make sure I'm heard, and that the people that aren't speaking up, but it's on their hearts and minds, they're heard as well. It's a hot topic. It's one that's not gonna solve our housing issue. So that really is my point of bringing that up.
No, and you're correct, and you know, engaging the public, as you all know, getting people to come to meetings is complicated,
tough.
so, any chance I get, I try to get people to sign up for Civic Ready. I'm gonna do a pitch here. We use it all the time. I use it a lot to notify the public on any public meeting we got going on, so.
Yep, and you can sign up on the town website,
Yeah.
go into the town office, sign up.
Mhm.
You can pick what you want to get information on. You don't have to get inundated by traffic closures if you don't care about those. But if you want to know about public meetings,
Yeah.
Mhm.
that's a good
It's
way
an
to go.
important one to sign up for sure.
And the other thing I just want to make one more comment is, I want us to be open, and I want people to understand the process, because I don't want it to get to June and then for it to be voted down.
Sure.
And I want people to understand that there is a process. We listen, we vote before anything happens, and that we have people's best interests in mind. Because if we get to June and it gets voted down, then all of those hundreds of hours of work have to start again, or something. I don't know what happens if it gets voted down, but I think we have to set that communication, and we have to make people feel comfortable with it, which is why I'm bringing it up.
Well, the only other thing I'll add to this conversation is, having watched this now for a couple of years and seeing this final document, I want to just commend you guys for getting it to this point.
It is great.
You've
absolutely.
done a great job of, I mean, this is a 270-page document. And, you know, to get to the point where we're, you know, focused in on one sentence or two, I mean, I don't want it in any way to take away from how much you guys have done to get it to this point, and can really applaud your work,
Yeah,
so.
go that.
Question. So if I understand right, if we review between now and our March meeting, at the March meeting then, we can discuss it to make those small changes, and I'm saying small because it's,
If we're going to make any
Figuratively
change. But we have to
speaking, yeah.
understand that the significance, I guess, what we're hearing is if we make changes, we may not make the.
substantive, right?
Substantial change,
Right.
I think we have to be
Material-
really careful in making
Material
changes.
changes
'cause
would
these
have to
things-
go through the process, right? Is that what we're saying? Okay.
Correct.
And
So if come March, put the example out there, you want to make some tweaks, those tweaks are going to have to go back to the comp plan committee. They're going to have to make a determination on if it's substantial or not. And then if it's not, then it can continue with its process. If it is, then there's going to have to be another public meeting. That's it.
But if they're not substantial, but if they address these issues, this issue, in it, you know,
and just to,
then we could still stay
not
on
to put
track
Michelle on the
time-wise,
spot,
right?
but is it the immediate data gathering that's the fundamental
that's-
concern? Or
that
the
is
two
a-
statements about the relationship between seasonal housing and workforce?
Well, I think it's a combination of both, right? I mean, and again, it's not,
And I don't want to put you on the
right,
spot.
it's not
Yeah.
a, you know, I don't think you need to rewrite the whole plan. But I think I think it's the optics, I think it is we're gonna do immediate data gathering, and that we think that, you know, when we make statements like short-term rental are causing things, then that sets sets an expectation in people's minds that we're going to do something about it immediately.
Yeah,
And
and
those
I
are my
agree.
concerns.
I agree, because on that very one issue, I know they're two separate things.
Right,
Affordable housing and short-term rentals.
right,
It's two different budgets entirely.
exactly.
So if we can make the change.
We could talk about that.
Yeah, I
I
think,
mean, you know, there's people that think differently about
Oh,
that.
true.
yeah. And I think that's what, I mean, I guess that's where I want to just, we'll talk more in March, but to step back and think, this is like trying to take two very different points of view on a very sort of an issue that has roiled every community throughout the country.
Yeah.
To just try to say something that recognizes at a high level the issue so that we don't preclude, I mean, anyway, I can see some value in keeping it in because we're not just talking about what Rockport's going to do in the next couple of years. This is a 10-year process. but let's.
And I do have to agree, John, when I said that short-term rentals and affordable housing are different, it depends on what the short-term rental property is. Yeah, my vision at that, when I said that, was thinking like a waterfront rental versus a affordable housing. And
There's a lot of
Yeah, there's a
degrees
wide
and shades
variety.
of gray, and,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
not just a black and white
Yeah.
question.
Yeah,
totally agree. So
okay.
if we can think about it and discuss in March, I'll
Yeah.
have a.
Everybody will get a little bit of a chance to,
to.
okay.
So we
So-
don't need a vote.
So
is
we're
what
not
you're
going to
saying.
vote on
Okay.
this.
Right.
So you'd probably want to move to table.
Move to, is there a motion to table the action item on the comprehensive
Marshall wants to say
plan?
something.
Can I just make a simple motion?
Hold on, just
Hold on.
Marcia might want to.
Marcia, do you want to say something?
Very much so.
Okay. And if you could, we're going to limit the comment to 3 minutes, but go for it.
Okay, so I could limit the $36,000 I pay a year to live in my own house. So I'd like to limit that too, but I have things to say, and I need the time to do it.
Out of respect for everyone else's time.
So first of all, thank you everyone on the comprehensive. Okay. For doing all this work. I know I was part of it for a while, and for some very specific reasons, I decided I didn't want to be part of it any longer. But I am here tonight. So, talking about experts, I know that the people who have worked on this plan.
Marcia, the only reason it's important that you speak into the mic is so that people at home can hear you. We've had comments from listeners that they are having a hard time hearing at the select board meeting, so that's just my
Okay,
reminder.
thanks for letting me know.
Okay.
But there are experts in the state of Maine who have talked about housing. People like Dan Brennan, who is the director of Maine Housing. Another person, Greg Payne, is from the Office of
I
Policy.
need to interrupt you for a minute, Marcia. Did you attend the public hearing on the comprehensive plan?
I went to meetings.
So
was
is
part
this
of
the
the
first time? I understand that, but is this the first time you're making a comment?
I took pictures for Orion.
Yeah.
I
Well-
gave them to him. I don't know what you're asking me.
Well, I think you're raising an issue similar, I think, to the issue that we've just been discussing.
Exactly, that's why I came.
And I'm wondering, because I'm not sure this is the right forum to be trying to educate us on, we understand that this is a controversial issue in Rockport. We, among ourselves, have agreed that we'll talk in March after we've had a chance to think about this.
About my being able to speak tonight?
I'm suggesting that if we're going to start over with a whole discussion of whether it's what to do about short-term rentals in Rockport, I think the select board has decided that we're not going to regulate short-term rentals. We haven't. There's some language in our comprehensive plan that mentions short-term rentals. And what I'm asking is, did you attend the public hearing to raise this issue with the comprehensive plan committee so it could have been addressed at the time the comprehensive plan committee was considering these issues?
When the comprehensive plan was printed and made available, it wasn't printed, it was made available on the town website, is the first time that I knew that there was this combination of short-term rentals, and that's why I'm here tonight, to respond to that.
Okay.
So, as I was saying, there are people who have worked on this in the state, and they have, and the last one is the Maine Economic and Community Development studied this too. These are all Maine agencies. At the Office of Policy and Innovation and the Future, they say our housing stock is old. We are limited by a lack of public sewer and hindered by zoning. And we also have a lack of labor supply. So these are some of the problems that we have that seem to be put on the back of vacation home owners. Orion had suggested that there are 2,600 dwelling units in Rockport. And this was previously when Orion has spoken about this. And there are about 150 vacation rentals. So that's about 5% of our dwelling units. First thing. In the town manager's report that came out a day or two ago, it said, the comprehensive plan is done with the final recommendation from the Comprehensive Plan Committee. This plan is implementable, non-controversial, and will push the community in the right direction. This document is off to the state for their approval and is ready for the June vote. That's what it said in the newspaper. Okay. Now, Denise, you yourself have said, and you said it tonight again, our voters decided this issue in 2021, which was not that long ago. They don't want us to adopt SDR regulations. And then also, you also said on March 22nd, 2021, the referendum put before the public said it did not support these restrictions. The town will not draft an ordinance for a future vote. You said that on March 22nd, 2021. Another concern is that there's a member of the select board who wrote an article that was called In Support of Community, Not Short-Term Rentals. And that was in December of 2020. And in that letter it said, property owners scream that their property rights are being violated. And having high-turned businesses operating next door decreased my property value. That's something we should know about. He also said short-term rentals are car washes. And I will finish that up. One moment. And if we get so many of these, we'll end up with totally dark neighborhoods, like they have in southern Maine. Beyond the legal wrangling over property rights, this is still from a member of this board, the prevailing theme I'm hearing to the proposed ordinance, again, that is short-term rental regulation.
That was rejected.
Right. I'm hearing
But Marcia,
really boils down to self-interest, or put another way, plain and simple greed. We will have a town-wide resort motel that only benefits a select few.
Marcia, I have to thank you for your time, for coming. We know you're passionate on this issue. I think we understand that in this community there are people passionate on both sides of the issue. Thank you for your comments. We
Right, and the
appreciate you
vote
coming before the
was
board.
70%.
That's fine. We're
against
not
this.
relitigating. There was no suggestion tonight or in the comprehensive plan that we are moving towards regulating short-term rentals. So I think you can rest assured that this issue is not in front of this select board right now. So thank you for coming. And thank you for your
Also,
comments. But we have other action. We need to discuss
In the
some other
bylaws
things.
of the Select Board, Section 5, no member may participate or vote on any matter in which the member has a conflict of interest or other disqualifications. And I want to bring that up. And the last thing is, in Section 7 of the bylaws of the Select Board, the duty of the Select Board is to execute the will of the people. Section 8B, neither the board nor its members shall give orders to any such officer or employee of the town, either publicly or privately. And I only bring that
Marcia, please have a
up.
seat. We have other action. We need to finish
Thank you
this
so much,
motion.
everyone.
All right. Do we have a motion to table the action on the certification?
Yeah. I'll make a motion to
Okay.
table that till
I'll
next month.
second it.
Michelle will second it.
Yep.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, so we'll take that up in March. Thank you, David, and thank you, Orion, for that. Next, we have a,
got lots of letters, and I would like to add that to the letter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you. Next is a discussion item on the ordinance review process.
Oh, yes.
John, do you want to introduce this for us? And
Well, it's somewhat in light of what we're discussing here. So, Ryan, you might as well go ahead and go up to the podium because you're as actively involved in this as anyone.
Ryan's like, great.
Yeah, I know. All right. So, Town of Rockport for many decades has had an ordinance review committee. The ordinance review committee has been a key part of drafting ordinance changes, particularly in the area of land use ordinance, but even broader than that, and really tackling a number of different areas. Approximately a little more than 20 years ago, the ordinance review committee did not predominantly handle the land use ordinance. They were really handling other ordinances. Of course, this is a time before we had a town planner, very different time. And the planning board in most communities is really the place where ordinance changes emanate from, because they're the entity that works with the land use ordinance more so than anyone. And every town has to have a planning board. They don't necessarily have a planner, but there's a planning board. So statewide, that was sort of the model. The planning board at that time, 99, 2000, 2001, was really busy to the point where they were meeting twice monthly, and they had so many applications before them. At that point in time, the planning board said, we don't have time for this. We are handling subdivision after subdivision. We can't handle this work. We need to delegate that and hand that over to the ordinance review committee. So for the bulk of the last 20 plus years, the ORC has been the home of really all ordinance change in the town of Rockport. Now, fast forward to a few years ago, when we hire a full-time planner. We still have an ordinance review committee. We have a planning board who is probably as capable as ever.
Right, yep.
And in recent years have really taken on the zest for ordinance change and land use ordinance change. But we still have an ordinance review committee that exists, but we also have a planner that exists as well.
Right.
And we pay him, a handsome salary. We want to get his professional expertise. No, it's not a budget, Dustin. Not yet, not yet.
Salary.
That's next month. Next
That's
month.
right, that's right, that's March.
Done.
But this is a conversation Orion and I have had a number of times over the last couple of years. What do we do? Where does this go? To Denise and I have had this conversation, and what I'm, I guess, wanted to have the board discuss this. But one thing I would like to maybe throw on the table for the board to consider. The ORC is, it's been created as sort of this broad-based with expertise across the board, but that doesn't necessarily mean if they're not handling the same issue on the same type of ordinance, that expertise may be different than what the makeup of the board may entail. So for example, let's say there was a sewer ordinance that people weren't so happy with on the board. I don't know necessarily we have the expertise at present on the ORC to be able to handle that. But could we create a task force that could zero in on the issues, the various people who would be best, capable of handling that?
Yeah.
Or maybe the road acceptance ordinance. Okay, well, maybe there should be somebody an engineer, and maybe you should have this person and that person. But it's specific. It's like task force related as opposed to a standing
Having a
group
committee.
that solves everything.
Yeah.
So, I don't like to say to anybody, thank you for your service. You're willing to do great work for the town. We don't need your help anymore. I think we don't want to create what we see right now in the federal government where there's a lot of action taken, but maybe we have a solution to the problem we just created. Might I suggest that if the ORC and the model of the ORC is a bit more of a past for Rockport, that the solution is to fill that gap with task forces if necessary. So for example, the sewer ordinance is a big issue. It's a lot of people, a lot of points to weigh in. To just task that, or as the board were to say at their meeting in July, when you set your goals and my goals, to say, okay, we want a new sewer ordinance for next June. Probably wouldn't be, that's probably not a reasonable representation to say, go to it, Orion, and away we go. But maybe it's to create a task force, because that's a bigger topic. Whereas Orion notices there's an issue with maybe build out of homes along private roads before they should come back to you potentially to have them taken over potentially as a town road. That's something he could easily tweak, bring to the board. You all can read that very quickly and understand the topic. But something that's bigger, maybe that's a task force issue. We've had a lot of,
What's that ordinance review team, group, committee, what are they doing right now that's above and beyond what you're doing?
That's the issue, because the
Okay.
planning board has taken over the land use ordinance. They really haven't
Okay.
had anything to do, and I think are sort of looking for direction. Are they needed? Are they?
Committee hasn't met for 2 years.
All right,
Yeah.
well, that tells us right
But
there.
the committee's not going to.
Well, right, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think that tells us, if we have a committee that hasn't met for 2 years and that we've handled all these other things through task force, through
Yeah.
other committees, that, and I don't know what our charter says we have to do to
You know,
dissolve a
committees
committee,
serve
but-
at our pleasure.
Oh,
and-
okay.
Right.
And we're, in touch with the ordinance review committee. I mean, we haven't,
Yeah.
we're not going to just sort of end it without being in discussion with them. Hang on. You'll have to come up to the mic if
Yeah,
you are
I just
going to
wanted to
make it.
I saw this, one stick around. We bought a house 10 years ago, and a little while after that, I started attending all the ORC meetings. I didn't like them because they were 8 a.m. in the morning, but
Yeah, they do meet early.
I got to them, and then I eventually became a member. I think there's a little bit of misinformation about who's on the committee in terms of what John wrote. It's actually not so much specialist as a fairly, I won't say a broad representation, but a broader. So we do have an engineer. We have Will Gartley, a lot of experience. One thing that Will has brought to it in the past is, hey, here's what's going on in other towns. There's Richard Remsen, I think a lot of you are familiar with, Taylor Allen, Robert Hall, myself, I think is the current membership, has been the current membership.
And Steve Smith.
I'm an engineer, but that was automotive, aerospace, other stuff. So I'm not going to advocate the committee needs to exist. I'm not going to advocate get rid of it. What the committee did a lot of when I was involved in it was not policy stuff. It was really saying, okay, here's the direction the select board's interested in. Let's, in some cases, ordinance been drafted, let's look at it and have a set of eyes, some with a lot of experience looking at ordinances. I, in the past, have been on committees here and elsewhere, and see, is there something with this ordinance that we might want to revise to get the intent of it? The other thing we used to spend a bunch of time on was going through the ordinance and finding places where there were conflicting sections, like, this section says one thing and this says another, and they're not. Sometimes
And the
they're in
land
direct
use ordinance
conflict.
was really rife
And
for
a
that.
lot of the effort was
Yep.
on that sort of thing. So that's what the
Thank you.
committee
Yeah.
used to do.
Yep, thanks, David, that's good.
Well, the other thing, the ordinance review committee was instrumental in helping when there was a time where the planning board was pretty busy with subdivisions. And
yeah.
I was on the planning board for 11 years, and in that time, we never had a subdivision.
Right.
So there there was like
Came
a
in a wave.
period in time where it was just this huge wave. It disappeared, and the ordinance review committee, I guess, shifted to David's point of looking at all the ways that the ordinance now had contradictory and redundant places, and it was a mess, quite frankly, and you guys did a great job cleaning it up. But, it's kind of like their work is done, and I think my sense is to go to that task force kind of philosophy, like when we need it, get it. Otherwise, we don't need to have another committee and, just making work for them when
And we're
they
very
really don't
lucky
need it.
that we have a number of people in this community that when you say, we need a task force, or we need a
Yeah, we can pull
committee,
them
we've
together.
got people that sign up. So I don't think there's a risk in that if we needed something, we wouldn't have people sign up
Exactly.
to do it. So we're very lucky in that regard, so.
Yeah, and this all predates, of course, Orion, who's
Yep.
been a huge asset, and particularly with the land use ordinance. So, but there are other topics that, it's not going to be in his wheelhouse to be able to do, and it's good to have, people that we can pick from the community, and is there anybody, my experience with like the Maine Municipal Association has not been, very fruitful as far as getting this you'd think they'd have specialists, but they really don't, so.
And the ORC is really it's a unique thing in Rockport. Rockport is really one of the few towns that has anything like this. So it's largely driven by the fact we have so many people who are overqualified for being a citizen. You get,
true. It's
David
very
says, "Oh, I'm
true.
not an engineer," but come on,
But
right?
it is, right, yeah.
I wasn't a civil
Okay, but let's
Give yourself credit,
Let's
David,
give
come
yourself
on.
a little bit of.
Right.
other kind of.
Okay, still, so we've got people who are just tremendously, one, they want to give back, and two, they have gifts that you can't find in most places. So,
Right.
And we couldn't afford to hire.
right, exactly,
Exactly,
yeah.
right.
I mean, the harbor master plan, we've got everybody covered, and it's fantastic. The VPI, I mean, it's really a cool thing that we have the ability to do, and as Michelle said, the ability to just say, hey, we've got a problem, we
And we
need.
got like 10 applications.
then
It's
everybody's there,
amazing, right?
right,
It's amazing,
Right.
so.
And part of this, the one thing about this that you would lose is the ability to say, and quite frankly, it matters to the voters, to say, okay, a group of Bob Hall, Taylor Allen, Will Gartley, David Cock, that Richard said, they've already looked at this, that's a good idea. I know Richard, I go, I see him at the waterfront, and so I know, there's that is why it's important, and so losing, the potential of losing some of that would be an issue. But if you had to use that sewer ordinance as the example,
Right,
if
you
you
had a
had
task force made up of
Right.
people who would have the
Right.
same credibility
Yeah.
with the voters.
exactly, then you're sort of solving that problem already. And if it's of 25% lot coverage to 33% lot coverage, that's probably not the issue that's going to drive people upset. And it won't matter if there's an ORC or not for
Right.
that. And as long as the issues are easily digestible, easily understood, that you all can go through them and, you know, go through a 5-page ordinance or something. I think your review, you won't require that additional level of review, hopefully. So that's the hope.
I think that sounds like a good approach to me. I don't know what
Michael,
action we
Kim,
need
are
to
you
do,
okay
but-
on that?
Yeah, I mean, I just saw this on the agenda. I wasn't quite sure what our
Yeah, where we were
discussion
going.
was going to be. My issue at the moment with ordinances is there's a lot of things that are popping up in the wastewater ordinance that I'm not sure, what is our plan to,
I think we want to
eventually
have a
get there.
sewer ordinance task force
yeah,
sooner rather than later.
yeah,
'cause we really
I do
need
too.
to
Because
get that going.
there is some stuff that's, I'm seeing just on
Right.
a couple residents had problems with their billing, and they called me in, and I looked at it, and I said, gee, that is really not right. And so I'm anxious to see
Yeah, and we could
something-
even consider being ready maybe next month
Yeah.
to sort
To
of
do
move
that.
forward on that, because in our discussions with Camden, that the issue of our sewer ordinance has come up, and I think we just need a good functioning sewer ordinance. so.
Agree.
Yeah. And regulations, not just the ordinance.
Yeah, well,
I found this
apparently-
other document
I know,
now
there's
that's
this
like
other
called
document that's
regulation.
called the
and it's not-
regulations,
you
and
know.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, I was just looking at the ordinance. I didn't know we had
Yeah.
regulations too. So we'll sort all that out so people can find what they need to
Right.
know. So this is a discussion item. I don't see any reason to take action. I think we get that ready for March. We'll,
Okay.
you know, we can
Makes sense.
formally disband the ORC, but but we can do that in conjunction with our next steps on the sewer ordinance and sort of have that groundwork moving forward.
Great.
Makes sense.
Okay. Good discussion.
Great answers, Orion.
I know.
Yeah, thanks, Orion.
Well done,
Good
Orion.
job.
Anything else you want to add? Okay, select board liaison reports.
I'll go first and just remind everyone, and I think it's in your email too, the schedule from Megan for budget. So starts March 3rd when we get our packets.
And we have all that dates that are the same
yeah,
as
should have that
before,
calendar.
right?
Yep.
Megan sent out an email.
Megan
Yeah,
sent out an
so
email
nothing's
with all the
changed on
dates.
that.
I don't think
No.
any of those dates have changed,
Okay.
so
They haven't.
just make sure they're on your calendar. There's a lot of them. Well, it's fun. It's always fun in March and April. Get us through
It
there.
is,
So, yeah.
it is, only
It
because
is.
it's like the one time you're like looking at all the operations in
Everything,
town
right,
at the
yes,
same time.
yes,
and-
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, just what John wants.
Yes, that's what John's already been doing it, but we
Yeah.
will
Welcome
officially
to his
start March
January.
3rd. So that's my update. Just make sure they're on your calendar. I am the liaison with the Budget Committee, so I will help guide, but of course, we will all be in it together to review, so.
Great.
So as a former member of the Budget Committee long, long ago, I'm already getting PTSD.
I know, right?
Shit.
Get your highlighter out and
Oh,
your,
it's
and
happening.
your red
Select board
pen.
A while ago stopped letting Megan make dinner for the budget.
I,
Pizza. We're doing pizza.
Okay.
we need something,
Yeah,
we need
some
snacks.
sustenance.
I'm
All
happy
right.
to go next. Harbor
Okay.
Committee. I didn't make the meeting, but I did get the notes from the meeting. And actually, one of the comments at the very end of their notes was, "We'll be continuing to review the harbor ordinances this winter. Does the ORC still play a role in reviewing changes?"
Well,
Well, now you have that.
that's right.
So they do have some changes that they did recommend as far as the harbor ordinance. I think Orion was copied on those.
Oh,
So-
see, that's a great example
Yeah,
of
so,
different ways
So,
to get ordinances done.
Don't want to jump in on this, Kim, but, so, okay, you need an ordinance, you need language for an ordinance crafted. How do we want to handle that?
so they've made the motions to recommend 2 ordinance changes. So at this point, you've been copied on it.
So is Orion going to be the keeper
Orion would
of
be the,
anything with land use?
Yeah, so that particular ordinance, like we're looking in it to see how it goes. I don't remember off the top of my head. Certain ordinances have a particular protocol of how they're edited and amended in the process they follow. So I've asked a couple people to weigh in on it, and yeah, we'll get to them.
All right, because it means the next meeting is the 26th.
26, okay,
Yeah, I moved it back a week.
okay. Cool.
That's pretty much the end of my report, but it was just kind of interesting that that question came up tonight.
Yeah. Well, that's good.
funny, yeah.
Good timing.
But
Yep, shows us different paths to get to the final ordinance for select board review.
so I'm assuming you'll be at the meeting too, or no, or no? Just send an email, okay. Perfect,
Anything else?
that's it
John?
for now.
I can jump in with the Harbor Strategic Plan Task Force as the liaison there. We did choose Richardson Associates, as you guys, I think we mentioned that at the last meeting. We just signed the contract finally with them, I'm told. So we've got
That's right.
signatures on paper. We did have the kickoff meeting with them on January 30th, kind of started walking through the early stages of confirming our goals and objectives and soliciting input from various stakeholders. What the good news is the task force is made up of a lot of the, well, pretty much all the big stakeholders around the harbor. Everybody from Rockport Marine to the Parks Committee to, so it's got good representation, but we will be going out to members of the broader community with, who will be invited to attend 3 listening workshops, which will be, I believe, starting in mid-March. So, we've got a schedule, it's on track, we're rolling, stay tuned. Final report will be due for us to look at as a select board in June, late June, possibly early July, depending on where it lands. My other committee liaisonship is with the planning board. Just want to mention, we did have a very minor subdivision at 1113 Commercial Street, which is right across from the Patterson Mobile Home Park. It's just small. 2 buildings proposed to be added with 2 additional apartment units in each, so a little more housing, hopefully.
That's
There was a site plan review for an expansion of, I'm going to mispronounce, Hiwa Tofu, one of my favorites on Route 90, right by the high school, that hopefully will double its capacity.
Wow,
So,
that's great.
and the good news is we do not anticipate any significant impact on wastewater flow from making more tofu.
Nice, nice.
So I just want to remind everybody, eat more tofu because it's not only good for your health,
Yes.
it's good for our town.
That's right, it's
So-
great for our town.
well done.
I cannot top that one, but I will say the Conservation Commission is starting their first of their speaker series, monthly speaker series, on the 19th, 6 o'clock at the library. And they're all very good, interesting topics.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let's see, I got Parks is, going along, getting
Hard to,
good planning.
hard to plant in the
Yeah, they're
winter,
not
isn't it?
doing a lot of actual parks work, but planning for the spring and sort of continuing with their SWOT analysis, strengths, weakness, opportunities, challenges, to make sure our parks are as good as they can be. It's a great group. Library committee is, has gotten several bequests, so is starting to look at opportunities to encourage people to put the library committee, and as we've expanded that into the library foundation, to have people consider putting them into their wills if they love our library.
That's great.
So that's it for me. Okay, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Actually, on that note, Denise, have we ever, I know other towns have received significant endowments over time. Have we ever had any kind of a vehicle for people that in town that might want to work with the town to create an endowment for various things? From, like, I happen to know over in Camden, they have there's probably 15 different endowments, funds that they have, like the Village Green, you know,
They're tricky. We have a couple in Rockport. We haven't actively marketed for that because you end up, it depends on.
well,
whether-
I'm not suggesting market, but
Well, no, I
just
didn't
build
mean
an
it, but-
awareness
Yeah.
that there, like, there could be buckets we could create at some point.
Yeah.
That
The
if
administration of them, it can get
somebody in their
tricky.
will wants to leave a bequest to, because they like the harbor, or they like the
Mm-hmm.
boat clubs, or the, well, I can't talk about the boat clubs that way, but, because that's not town.
That doesn't help. the
But,
town.
you know what I mean.
I
Yeah.
do, I do. Yeah, I think we appreciate people loving the town of Rockport and wanting to donate money. I think it's helpful to have conversations because we have some donations that we have gotten years ago, but that in some ways create some concerns of how we actually administer them and,
More than we even realized.
yes, and trying to make sure those go to the purpose
To
that
the right things,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
that the donor wanted, trying to make sure we protect ourselves and do it right.
But in the meantime, we do have, like, the Rockport Library Foundation.
Exactly, the
that-
Library Foundation that's a 501c3, it's a way that's, and we're set up to manage things like that. So
Yeah.
that's the beauty of those.
We also, is the fire department also a 501?
They do have their own
Yeah,
separate
so-
Pacific Engine
There's another
Company.
Yeah,
Yeah,
there's another
there's
one.
another
It's not
place.
town,
They
though.
do. Right, town, right, separate.
Oh,
It's
Yeah.
separate
Yeah,
from us,
separate
just as
town.
the foundation
Just as the
is.
foundation
Yeah,
is.
This process that we've been going through with trying to work on the Weidman Fund has been eye-opening in terms of what's known and what's not known about how these funds work and the way that the state, both on a number of levels, works with them and what the requirements are for towns in managing them. And what I've come to find out is a number of towns aren't doing what the law calls for them to do.
Right.
So I think but I think there's a model that's been set up with the Library Foundation. I would love to see something similar with this building.
Absolutely.
Yes, the Opera House.
This is ripe for an endowment
Yeah.
of some sort, yes.
So we're,
Set up a-
as a preview of that conversation in the budget, we have some work to do still to sort of assess. That was in the budget last year, it hasn't been done yet, so we don't have that to feed into the budget. But this is a building that absolutely is crying out for someone who can put their loving arms around it
Yeah,
and say,
agree.
we want to
Yeah.
make, this is a big part of who Rockport is.
Yeah.
And try to get it a little bit off of the taxpayers.
Yeah,
But we've struggled to do that. In the 4 years I've been here, we just have not been able to get the traction on that. I hope we can at least start with a list of what ails the building.
I think that's a really good starting
You know?
point, to know what the scope of.
challenge,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But,
Agree.
but in sort of the broader sense, John, of your question, we haven't really done this is the easy steps to really be able to help out in a meaningful way. And even what I thought I knew about it, I knew even less after talking to some attorneys. So, that's always a fun
Right,
thing.
great.
All right, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
You guys are really on top of this.
So,
All right, all those in favor? Okay.
All right.